along shore, we estimated the energy component along shore. Now, if we turn to cross shore, we make the same assumption. The sediment transport is proportional to the energy of waves after breaking, meaning that when sediment transport starts, it starts when the energy of the waves is transformed in a mass movement of water. The wave, instead of just going up and down, when they break, there is a transformation of energy in kinetic energy, in movement of water. Water moves in the direction which is not just up and down, but moves towards the coast. And this is when sediment transport starts, because there is, on the one hand, the energy of the wave, on the other hand, there is the water that takes velocity in a given direction, and there is interaction with the sea bottom, and there is interaction. The interaction is the reason why waves break. Okay, so let's concentrate, even in this case, from the breaker line, which is the average position where wave break, and the swoosh zone. In this distance, we have the cross-shore sediment transport. So basically, if this is the mean sea level, we have wave that break about here. This is breaker line. And we have here the shoreline. And this is the so-called surf zone and the swoosh zone. So this is the surf zone, if you remember. And this is the swoosh zone. The swoosh zone is, if you remember, the zone where the wave run-up takes place, so it's alternately covered by water and then dried up when waves go back. So here we have our cross-shore sediment transport. Cross-shore sediment transport. Of course, there is no strict boundaries for this zone. We have some sediments that are transported also offshore, but the sediment transport rapidly decreases when we get from the breaker line towards the offshore direction. One important thing to say is that the time scale of this process is generally short. It's a process that varies a lot in the different seasons. It's a process that has typically a seasonal time scale. We already know that usually a bar forms here, because here we have waves coming from the ocean that encounter basically the waves coming back from the shoreline, and therefore this conflict and this basically stagnancy of water in the breaker line favors the deposition of sediments, and so we get a bar here usually. The process can be studied in the same way by assuming that the sediment transport is proportional to the energy of waves. You can develop empirical equations. The literature proposes several formulations to try to understand the amount, to estimate the amount of sediment transport. I am interested I am interested in discussing this process from a qualitative point of view with you. So I think it is interesting to discuss how the shape of the coast evolves due to cross-shore sediment transport. This gives us the opportunity to gain an interpretation of what may occur. Like I am on a beach during summer. Let's suppose that during winter there is a sequence of storms that occur. How can this beach evolve? Or I am in a beach whenever I am there, and I look around, I see signs of, let's say, I see geomorphological features. So I see some features of the shape of the beach, and by looking at these features, I try to understand what's going on. So, basically, this is one first example. Possible evolution of a profile. This is also an example of a sketch that I made by Ernst because I couldn't take the figure from the book where I found it. And this is a possible evolution of a beach after a storm. First of all, if you look at a beach and you see an average sea level like the one that I depicted there, and you see afterwards a shape of the beach that basically presents a step like the pre-storm profile. You see that there is a flat beach and then a step, like the dune, for instance. The dune typically presents such a shape. What does this mean? It means that typically you see the step at the point where average surges, average storm arrive. So where it's located, the dune? The dune is located at the position that waves reach during an average extreme storm. In fact, on the dune, typically you see vegetation. Well, if you see vegetation, it means that only once in a while the waves get there. Only with an extreme surge. And the level of, extreme may have different meanings. Maybe once in a year, once in 2 years, once in 10 years. It depends on the local climatic and geomorphologic conditions. Usually I try to estimate the age of the dune by looking at vegetation. If you see vegetation on the dune, if you see trees that may be 10 years old, it means that in the last 10 years there were no salt water reaching these trees. If you see brushes that typically survive for a couple of years, and the assistance of an expert may be very helpful in this case, depending by observing the age of the vegetation, you may understand the frequency with which a dune is reached by a storm. So, what is the evolution of the dune, of the beach profile, of the cross-shore beach profile, if an extreme storm occurs? This is the typical evolution. Basically, what happens is that, let me make a sketch. Let's start from this kind of shape here. This is the mean sea level. What happens is that typically the highest waves get to this point, and then you may get an extreme event, and the wave height, the water gets to this point. And therefore, what happens is what you see depicted there. So there is a new shape after the storm. You get a new shape. There is erosion of the dune. Erosion of the dune operated by the waves. The material is transported offshore, and at the end of the story, it settles down in the surf zone. This is the typical evolution. After the storm, what happens is that the material that was transported here in normal condition is brought back by waves toward the beach. In normal condition, typically in calm conditions during summer, it's transported back. And here, wind reworks the dune. So at the end of the story, if the previous configuration was stable, at the end of the story, the beach tends to regain the original configuration by reworking, by wind, retransportation of sediments of sand by waves from offshore to inshore, and maybe human intervention, because of course, if you are interested in keeping the original shape of the beach, we may accelerate this process by taking the sand from the sea and then retransporting the sand ourselves and reshaping the dune. But what's important is to try to recognize these shapes and what may happen if there is an extreme event. This is one possibility. And this is an evolution that is caused by a storm. If you have sea level rise, what happens is this. Sea level rise is today an extremely concerning issue for, climate change. Actually, we are talking of very limited rises. The sea level rise due to climate change is, we are talking about few centimeters in 100 years. What is, I think, what should concern us more, it's not the average sea level rise. We should be more concerned by the effect of climate change in terms of extreme event, because what really matters in shaping rivers, in shaping the land, are the extreme events. It's not the average. The average sea level, if there is a change, even 10 centimeters, it's not really very effective. What's very effective is if there is a change in the extremes. So if the extreme wave height increases or the frequency of extreme events increases, then this is concerning, because what happens during an extreme event, it's compensated by 10 years of quiet conditions, to give you an order of magnitude.
In the case of Venice, would you consider it more as a rising sea level or in the case of extreme events?
In the case of Venice, I think that what is concerning is the high water. And if there is an increase of the frequency of high water, this is what concerns it. I don't think Venice is much concerned by I'm not an expert of Venice, but I would say that it's not much concerned by an increase of sea level due to climate change average. Because, as I said, we are talking about few centimeters in 100 years. It's not 1 meter, just to give an example.
But I just got a question, because you said that the beach will anyway retain the shape that it was before.
Yeah.
But we are worried so much about this coastal erosion. We shouldn't be worried, so because it will get back to normal a bit after.
Say again, you mean?
Because we're trying to avoid this erosion on the coastal areas.
Yeah.
But if we know that it will get back to normal after a certain time, the beach will take its original form. So why should we do all this protection,
Yeah, because coastal erosion, we are concerned when we are concerned depending on the drivers. So if we are not really concerned by the occurrence of an extreme event that may change the shape of the beach, we are more concerned by a human intervention that may reduce sediment delivery by rivers, and then you have coastal erosion that is not compensated anymore. We are concerned if the erosion takes place in areas that are exposed for some reason to high risk. Like if you have a commercial activity on the beach.
Yeah, if you have, yeah, you can't go, you can't.
Yes.
No, but I mean, like, because all this beach where people goes, you got this dune, and you got like just because it's for the tourism, and every year before the winter, they add sand.
Yeah.
From all the places.
Yeah, that's
they
they are sand.
But these places are not like they don't have any cities or anything. They're just for the tourism to
Yes.
go there. But they don't need to add the sand because what has been away will come back anyway. No?
Yeah, but you know, it may take a lot of time. Like if it takes 5 years and you're interested in getting it back soon, it's a problem if it takes long. And also, you have, as I said, you have to inspect what were the reasons for coastal erosion. If it is just an extreme event that occurs once in 10 years, and then it takes 2 years to get back, okay. You may not be concerned. If it is sea level rise, let's suppose that the sea level rise is effective. If it is sea level rise, of course it doesn't come back. And therefore, this is why you put sand there. And if it is reduced sediment delivery by rivers, it's a process that doesn't revert back. So you need to put sand, because otherwise, if the sand doesn't come from the river, you need to put it artificially. And there. And basically, to give you an idea, this is an effect of sea level rise. And you see that the effect is similar to that one that we saw before. There is an erosion, an increased erosion, and sand is displaced back into the sea. And in this case, if the sea level doesn't decrease, you don't revert this. And this is the evolution of the beach profile. Sorry, it's beach nourishment. So when we do beach nourishment, because we want to increase the extension of the beach, soon after the nourishment you have this kind of profile that is indicated with thick line, and then, of course, there is the reaction of the waves, because the situation is not in equilibrium, and it gets reshaped, as you see, with the dashed line.
This is only a short-term solution, it's not a long-term solution.
No, this is short-term. Typically, it's nourishment. Nourishment usually it's maybe done every year.
Just for us to avoid the problem now, just to push it further away.
Yes.
But when you talk about sea level rise, it's only like maximum 50 centimeters, like a few centimeters per year, so it doesn't really have a...
How many did you say? You said 5 centimeters per year.
I said no. I think it's even. I don't. It depends on the area actually. But
it depends on the area, but I think we are talking. I'm not sure I have time to talk about it, but we are talking about 10 centimeters per 100 years.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
Yeah, and it's not really relevant. I mean, it's not really concerning. And even when people talk about highlands that are going to be grown, this is extremely unlikely. And the only thing, there are some theory that basically postulate that the Greenland and the Antarctica may be subjected to a tipping point, like if you increase the temperature, you get to a threshold when you have a sudden melting of Greenland, the ice in Greenland and Antarctica. And there are studies, researches that aim to look in the past to check if this occurred when temperature was much higher on the Earth than now. So basically they try to understand whether there was a sudden melting of Greenland, of ice in Greenland in the past. Because, Greenland is called Greenland because it was green in some time. And this is what we believe. But indeed there are indications, there are relicts, archaeological relicts that suggest that it was green in the past.
So it was free ice, it was ice-free.
Totally ice-free. And in fact, we know that the sea level was like
60 meters.
Yeah, 60 meters. Yeah, I think I don't remember, but it was much higher.
60 meters higher.
Yeah, today.
Yeah, because if you melt all the ice in Greenland and Antarctica, indeed the sea level goes up a lot. And therefore the question is, did it happen suddenly, it was a
Okay.
sudden event, or it was a very gradual one that occurred in 1 million years? Because climate change, the problem is the timing. If it occurs in 1 million years, it's not concerning because people adapt. And also, if it occurs in 100 years, people adapt. I mean, if you have to leave a coastal area because you have 1 meter of sea level increase, but it occurs in the range of 100 years.
Yeah, it's always depending on the timing, sure.
Yeah, we adapt. The problem is if you have a sudden increase of sea level of 2 meters in 10 years, then it's a problem. And therefore they are trying to understand whether it can happen that there is
How did it happen in the past and how will it happen in the future?
Yeah, and you know, the interpretation is controversial. There are scientists who say that there is no tipping point. There are other scientists that postulate that you may have, below the ice cover in Greenland and Antarctica, you may have open water, like internal lakes.
Yeah,
indeed, there are some.
And you can really
Yeah, there are some. We know that in Antarctica, and also it was proved also in Greenland, there are subglacial lakes.
Yeah, but we don't know how big they are.
Yeah, we don't know how big they are. So there are some scientists who say, let's suppose that there is a huge lake. At a certain point, you break the ice and you get a flood from the lake. And so this is the reason of concern. But if sea level rise takes place to the current pace is millimeters, but I think it is fraction of millimeters per year. So it's really something that it's...
Because you said just by adding water, but also do we talk about sea level rise by the expansion of the water due to the seawater temperature increasing?
Yeah, but it is
it's only a few as well.
It's negligible. It's negligible.
So, Professor, if you study, like, will find out that the melting process of the ice will happen in 100 years,
Yeah.
we will not consider it like a problem. We say, okay, we will find a way to adapt ourselves, but what about like the ecosystem of the freshwater melting, like diffused in the ocean?
You know, the Earth in the past was much different with respect to now, and the ecosystem adapts, and also the living species, they adapt. So, to give you an example, if temperature increases and then you have to leave the south of Italy because it becomes impossible to cultivate, to have agriculture there. So if you don't have water, it means that you cannot irrigate, and then there is no agriculture. It means that people are forced to leave because they don't have any way to sustain themselves, and they have to leave. But this means that you will get land for cultivation in Sweden, much more than now, and therefore you have migration. This is what occurred in the past.
But if you want to preserve the actual situation,
Why do you want to preserve the current situation? Meaning that
you need to go to Switzerland to cultivate instead of...
yeah, but I mean, in the past we had glaciations, unfortunately, but we adapted, and the people living there, the humans were already there, they adapted. They left the Alps and came to live in the south of Italy. But also recently, you know, we have witnesses that say that the agriculture in the Alps moved back and forth depending on the movement of the glaciers. And in the Middle Age, there are remains that tell us that the glaciers were much shrinking with respect to today. And people went to cultivate high in the Alps at very high altitudes in the 1500s. And then the little glacial era came in 1700 and they left. And so, I mean, you don't have any, the only thing you have to seek for equilibrium. And seek for equilibrium means that ecosystem may need to adapt. And they adapt, and also humans, we can adapt. Migrations in the past were originated by climate change of conditions. Maybe that there were extreme events like meteorites or something like that. The humans, you know, the human species was originally born in Africa, and then for some reason, Africa, for some reason they moved to Australia and to Europe. probably it was a migration forced by external conditions, because people don't migrate if they don't have some needs. And even now, why there is migration from Africa and Middle East? One reason is, of course, political tensions. But if you look at the countries where you have political tensions, typically are countries where you have very difficult living conditions, like lack of water, lack of resources in general. So when there are countries where there are lack of resources, then you trigger political tensions are triggered, and in any case people try to leave. And the reason why, if you look also at Italy, what is the reason why there was migration in the past from the south to the north? Because the north had more resources and people migrated. And you adapt. I mean, it's not a big problem. The problem is that if the change is sudden, then of course you have very significant political tensions and you may have wars. If the change is very slow, I mean, adaptation is much easier. Otherwise, if you have a sudden change, we get a war. That's for sure. I mean, we think that today we are safer than in the past with respect to global wars. I think we are safer because we are getting settled in a more efficient way. So everybody's happy because everybody has food, everybody has resources, and therefore the risk of wars is reduced. But if we got in extreme conditions, due to, I don't know, impact of meteorites or something else that puts us in a difficult situation, for sure war will occur again, wars. Why not? I mean, there is no reason why they shouldn't occur anymore. Anyway, we are talking about something that is not really... let's go back to coastal engineering.
Can I ask you the last question? Concerning the sand, is it only found on the coast, or even if you go offshore for hundreds of miles, the seabed could also consist of sand?
No, sand is limited to very... the distance, if you go offshore, you get to a certain point where there is no sand anymore on the bottom of the sea. And also, if you go with for snorkeling, you realize, even in sandy beaches, you realize that there is a sudden change and decrease of sand as you get offshore. And even if you go in the Adriatic Sea, where sand is extremely much offshore, you observe sudden changes in the little sand. It depends, the extension of the sandy area depends on, of course, on the lithology and on the amount of sand that you have available. But when you get much offshore, there is no sand anymore.
I appreciate the transport.
Sorry?
On the transport. If
Yeah.
you don't have enough energy to transport the sand because it's too heavy, you can only transport the fine sediments like clay.
Yeah, but it is, But even if you have strong currents, it's a very isolated phenomenon. Usually, the huge transport is caused by breaking of waves. But offshore, we don't have any more sand.
No.
Okay, so basically, try just to understand what is the dynamic of the process and the dynamic of the evolution. This is another example. If you build a seawall, you get at the top of the seawall, you get a significant erosion. And then the sand that is eroded there, it's transported a little bit offshore. I think this is the last example. So, there is a nice video that I wanted to show you. And you see that there is a treatment of criteria that have been proposed to determine empirically when erosion prevails on deposition. Because this is interesting to try to estimate if a beach is subjected to accretion or erosion. And these are empirical criteria. And as much of coastal engineering, this relationship here is empirical. And you don't need to learn it by memory, absolutely. It's just a way to show you what are the drivers. So H0 and L0 are wave height and length in deep water. So these are two fundamental drivers. K is a constant, it's an empirical constant. Beta is the beach slope. E50 is the grain diameter of the beach particle. the 50% sieve diameter. Do you remember what I'm talking about? I mean, the D50 is the diameter corresponding to the material that remains in 50 in the sieve of the corresponding diameter. So basically, you pass the material through sieves with decreasing diameter, and you get to a diameter of the sieve that retains 50% in weight of the material, and this is D50. Okay? And here there are indications for the K value. And here there is a description of the constructive force and destructive forces. So basically gravity and energy waves. This is very descriptive. And I leave this to you to read. And again, at the exam, I may just ask you to give you an example among these and ask you how the beach profile evolves. I suggest you anyway to read this. Okay? And let me show the video. The video is nice, I think. And this is extreme wave conditions, and you see how the beach is eroded and the bar forms. And then I think that there is also it is also shown how it gets back to the original shape after decreasing the energy of waves. No, it's okay. This is the final shape. Yeah, this is with the different wave forcing. You see that in this case the constructive forces prevail, and sand is brought back to.
But this kind of model are made with the same grain size.
Yeah, it's a model. It's a model, and let me see. No, this is, sorry, I didn't want to get to this. I want to
almost half the world's population.
get back here. This is a case where destructive forces prevail, so we have erosion at the beach. And then afterwards, let's try to understand how the wave forcing changes. So look at the waves now, it's accelerated, but look at the water level. And then there is a strong difference in the energy of waves and turbulence and etc. I'm not sure if there is a description, a quantitative description of the wave forcing in the two cases. But this is a nice example. Let me see. No, there is no description. Okay, now let's then move to the next topic. And the next topic is saltwater intrusion. You have a lecture here, and this is the lecture. I will make reference to a PowerPoint presentation as usual that is derived from this page. Okay, so what is saltwater intrusion? Basically, let's suppose that you have a coast that is permeable. If the coast is not permeable because it's rocky, you don't have any saltwater intrusion, of course. And saltwater intrusion is given by seawater that penetrates into the land, goes into the land through infiltration. And if the coast is permeable, this naturally occurs. It's something that you can't avoid. For instance, let's suppose that you have a permeable dry coast, which is an impossible situation because, let me make a scheme like this. Let's suppose that you have a mean sea level here, let's suppose that the coast is permeable. Let's suppose for now that the sea level is constant, the sea is just calm. If here the medium, the soil, is permeable and dry, and the sea is calm, you get infiltration of salt water into the land at the same level of the sea. And this goes into the land indefinitely, forever, if you have permeability and if you don't have other forces that contrast, other drivers that contrast this infiltration. I said that this is an impossible situation because first, the sea level is not constant, but this is not really affecting our reasoning, meaning that when the sea level increases, when there is more energy of waves, you get a higher level of salt water into the land, and conversely when the sea level decreases. So this is not affecting our reasoning. It's an impossible situation because it's impossible that you have a permeable land dry forever. Usually from the land you have fluxes of fresh water flowing into the sea. For obvious reasons, over the land you have rainfall. Rainfall infiltrates into the land and goes towards lower elevations. So there is a travel of water. If the land is permeable, there is a travel of water in the soil towards the sea. And therefore you have some water fluxes from here. Because you have rainfall here. It may be rainfall, it may be rivers, but the land, if it's permeable, it's characterized by water fluxes. And of course, the flux of fresh water